Hello ECWG, this is Marion. I'm the Education Cluster Coordinator for South Sudan. The Education Cluster in South Sudan is very young. It was formed in October 2010 and has only had dedicated staff since January this year, when Save the Children hired a Deputy Coordinator and UNICEF hired me. The first few months have really been focused on establishing some kind of foundation for the workings of the cluster here. We've got an MOU signed between SAVE and UNICEF and have developed a TOR for the education cluster as part of, and as part of that we agreed on roles and responsibilities for the Ministry of Education and the co-leads and cluster partners. In terms of emergency response, we've been fortunate that the referendum in January did not lead to any conflict or crisis. And the main issue we've been planning for and responding to is the influx of Southerners returning from the north. So far, around 260,000 individuals have returned, and we've been working at state level to identify learners and teachers and establish temporary learning spaces, and working with the government to address some policy issues around language of instruction, recognition of returnee teacher qualifications and returnee student certificates. In recent weeks, there's been some internal conflict in Jonglei and the border of Lakes and Western Equatoria states, with over 34,000 people displaced and some schools occupied by the SPLA. The security situation in these areas is extremely difficult, but we're working with the Child Protection Subcluster to plan a response, as well as undertaking high-level advocacy with OCHA on the issue of occupation of schools by the army. I think one of our strengths as a cluster is the good relationship we have with the Ministry of Education. We've been working very closely with them, and they chair our bi-weekly meetings which happen at the Ministry of Education. Actually this week there's been a reshuffle, so I'm not sure who the new focal point within the ministry for the cluster will be, but I'm hopeful that the new person will continue to take on this leadership role and help me navigate the ministry and find ways to make things move as quickly as possible within the bureaucracy of government. We've also been building really strong relationships with some of the other clusters here, in particular WASH, where we're undertaking a joint prioritisation exercise to identify schools most in need of water points and latrines. We're also working with Child Protection and have conducted a joint training on child-friendly spaces and psychosocial support. And lastly, we're also working with the shelter cluster on the issue of returnees and IDPs using schools as shelter, which has been a problem in some states. I think perhaps our greatest challenge is one around information management. South Sudan is an advantage in that there's quite a strong EMIS system which the government has been working on for several years with UNICEF and AED. However, apart from this yearly data collection, there's actually very little flow of information between the 10 states and to the national level here in Juba. And I'm hoping that the cluster can make quite a big impact in terms of developing an information management system that builds from and feeds into the EMIS system, to create a systematic way to track what's being done by cluster partners on the ground and the impact of emergencies on the school system here. UNICEF is hiring an information management specialist to work with the education cluster, and I'm really looking forward to their arrival. I think the area of work where we could most use global support and engagement is around priority cross-cutting issues, which for us would be on psychosocial support, youth, gender and disability. The ongoing work around supplies and learning spaces and teacher training will be done, but it takes a huge amount of time and energy to coordinate, and the cross-cutting issues can fall through the cracks. I think perhaps particularly in a place like South Sudan where so many children aren't in school anyway. Even though I've worked on these issues in my role with INE and with the global cluster, it's a real challenge to mainstream them effectively and meaningfully, especially, as I said, when there are so many other needs and demands on the cluster. South Sudan is becoming a country, the newest country in the world, on July the 9th, and it's an extremely interesting time to be working on education here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about how the action points that come out of the ECWG meeting and how practically we can work towards some of the objectives in the strategic plan here in South Sudan. We're working, I think we have an opportunity to influence policies, law and systems as they are formed, and I really hope that as you discuss and plan, you'll be thinking about a context like South Sudan where the capacity is very low, needs are extreme, but opportunities are high. I wish you a good meeting.